Civil War Journal, Louisa May Alcott. 1861, April. War declared with the South, and our Concord Company went to Washington. A busy time getting them ready, and a sad day seeing them off. For in a little town like this, we all seem like one family in times like these. At the station, the scene was very dramatic as the brave boys went away, perhaps never to come back again. I've often longed to see a war, and now I have my wish. I long to be a man, but as I can't fight, I will content myself with working for those who can. 1862, September, October. War news bad. Anxious faces, beating hearts, and busy minds. I like the stir in the air, and long for battle like a war horse when he smells powder. The blood of the maize is up. November. 30 years old. Decided to go to Washington as a nurse if I could find a place. Help needed, and I love nursing, and must let out my pent-up energy in some new way. Winter is always a hard and a dull time, and if I'm away, there is one less to feed and warm and worry over. I want new experiences, and am sure to get 'em if I go, so I've sent in my name and bide my time writing tales to leave all snug behind me and mending up my old clothes, for nurses don't need nice things, thank goodness. December. On the 11th, I received a note from Miss H.M. Stevenson telling me to start for Georgetown next day to fill a place in the Union Hotel Hospital. Mrs. Ropes of Boston was matron, and Miss Kendall of Plymouth was a nurse there, and though a hard place, help was needed. I was ready, and when my commander said march, I marched, packed my trunk, and reported in Boston that same evening. We had all been full of courage till the last moment came. Then we all broke down. I realized that I had taken my life in my hand and might never see them all again. I said, "Shall I stay, Mother?" as I hugged her close. "No, go," answered the Spartan woman. Until I turned the corner, she bravely smiled and waved her wet handkerchief on the doorstep. Shall I ever see that dear old face again? So I set forth in the December twilight, with May and Julian Hawthorne as escort, feeling as if I was the son of the house going to war. Friday the 12th was a very memorable day, spent in running all over Boston to get my pass, etc., calling for parcels, getting a tooth filled, and buying a veil, my only purchase. A.C. gave me some old clothes, the dear Sewells, money for myself and boys, lots of love and help, and at 5 p.m., saying goodbye to a group of tearful faces at the station, I started on my long journey, full of hope and sorrow, courage and plans. A most interesting journey into a new world full of stirring sights and sounds, new adventures, and an ever-growing sense of the great task I had undertaken. I said my prayers as I went rushing through the country white with tents, all alive with patriotism, and already red with blood. A solemn time, but I'm glad to live in it, and am sure it will do me good whether I come out alive or dead. All went well, and I got to Georgetown one evening very tired. Was kindly welcomed, slept in my narrow bed with 2 other roommates, and on the morrow began my new life by seeing a poor man die at dawn, and sitting all day between a boy with pneumonia and a man shot through the lungs. A strange day, but I did my best, and when I put Mother's little black shawl round the boy while he sat up panting for breath, he smiled and said, "You're real motherly, ma'am." I felt as if I was getting on. The man only lay and stared with his big black eyes and made me very nervous. But all were well behaved, and I sat looking at the 20 strong faces as they looked back at me, hoping that I looked motherly to them. For my 30 years made me feel old, and the suffering round me made me long to comfort every one. 1863, January. I never began the year in a stranger place than this. 500 miles from home, alone among strangers, doing painful duties all day long, and leading a life of constant excitement in this great house surrounded by 300 or 400 men in all stages of suffering, disease, and death. Though often homesick, heartsick, and worn out, I like it, find real pleasure in comforting, tending, and cheering these poor souls who seem to love me, do feel my sympathy though unspoken, and acknowledge my hearty goodwill in spite of the ignorance, awkwardness, and bashfulness which I cannot help showing in so new and trying a situation. The men are docile, respectful, and affectionate, with but few exceptions truly lovable and manly, many of them. John Sewer, a Virginia blacksmith, is the prince of patience. And though what we call a common man in education and condition, to me, is all that I could expect or ask from the first gentleman in the land. Under his plain speech and unpolished manner, I seem to see a noble character, a heart as warm and tender as a woman's, a nature fresh and frank as any child's. He is about 30, I think, tall and handsome, mortally wounded and dying royally, without reproach, repining, or remorse. Mrs. Ropes and myself love him, and feel indignant that such a man should be so early lost, for though he might never distinguish himself before the world, his influence and example cannot be without effect. For real goodness is never wasted. Monday, 4th. I shall record the events of a day as a sample of the days I spend. Up at 6, dress by gaslight, run through my ward and fling up the windows, though the men grumble and shiver. But the air is bad enough to breed a pestilence, and as no notice is taken of our frequent appeals for better ventilation, I must do what I can. Poke up the fire, add blankets, joke, coax and command, but continue to open doors and windows as if life depended on it. Mine does, and doubtless many another, for a more perfect pestilence box than this house I never saw. Cold, damp, dirty, full of vile odors from wounds, kitchens, washrooms, and stables. No competent head, male or female, to right matters, and a jumble of good, bad, and indifferent nurses, surgeons, and attendants to complicate the chaos still more. After this unwelcome progress through my stifling ward, I go to breakfast with what appetite I may, find the inevitable fried beef, salt butter, husky bread, and washy coffee. Listen to the clack of 8 women and a dozen men, the first silly, stupid, or possessed of but one idea, the last absorbed in their breakfast and themselves to a degree that is both ludicrous and provoking. For all the dishes are ordered down the table full and returned empty. The conversation is entirely among themselves, and each announces his opinion with an air of importance that frequently causes me to choke in my cup or bolt my meals with undignified speed, lest a laugh betray to these pompous beings that a child's among them taken notes. Till noon, I trot, giving out rations, cutting up food for helpless boys, washing faces, teaching my attendants how beds are made or floors swept, dressing wounds, taking Dr. Fitzpatrick's orders, privately wishing all the time that he would be more gentle with my big babies, dusting tables, sewing bandages, keeping my tray tidy, rushing up and down after pillows, bed linen, sponges, book and directions, till it seems as if I would joyfully pay down all I possess for 15 minutes' rest.